Today's discussion will center around the registered registered pension plans. Okay, so basically, it is, you might say, a sister product to the registered retirement savings plans that some of you are probably familiar with. But this is a registered pension plan, and what we're talking about here is an RPP is actually an employer-sponsored plan. There are two kinds of RPPs essentially. There's contributory and non-contributory. So contributory basically means that you as an employee will match what the employer is paying, or the employer is matching your contribution. In other words, both you as an employee and you as and then the employer, of course, contributes, becomes a contributory plan. A non-contributory plan basically means that the employer sponsors the entire plan. In other words, you don't have to contribute anything to it. The employer sponsors the whole deal, basically. So basically, it's either a situation of contributory or non-contributory plan. Now, the two types of RPP plans, okay, are what we call defined benefit and defined contribution. And these are very, very important to distinguish between the two of them. The defined benefit plan basically says that at a certain point in time, for example, age 65, if you work for me from the time you started now, let's say from the time you become age 65, I will guarantee you a certain income. So let's say in our example, you're going to get $5,000. Well, we've now identified the defined benefit. In other words, we have defined the benefit. We've said to you that if you work for me all the way through until you're actually age 65, when you're 65, I'm going to give you a pension of $5,000. So now you know exactly where you in actual fact you stand. You know exactly where that number comes from, and then, so therefore you can plan your whole retirement package, you might say, on that basis. So a defined benefit defines exactly what you're going to get at a particular point in time. In our example, let's say age 65. Now, when you go back to your Advantage, your LQP Advantage book, there are actually 4 different ways that you can arrive at this defined benefit. It's beyond the scope of this particular seminar, but I urge you to go back to your books and make sure that you look at the 4 different ways how they actually define the actual benefit itself. The sister to defined benefit is the defined contribution. In a defined contribution, what happens is we know exactly how much money each one of us are going to contribute. In other words, how much money you're going to contribute as the employee, how much money, let's say, I'm going to contribute as the employer. So we have now defined a contribution. The thing is, what we don't know is how much money you're going to get at the other end. In other words, here, what we're saying is that we know exactly how much money we have to put in up front. In other words, you put in your dollar, I put in my dollar, so I know exactly, let's say, what it's going to cost me. The thing is that what I can tell you is I can't tell you how much money you're actually going to have at age 65. So it becomes a little more difficult to plan your retirement around there. Also, if you retire at age 65 and the interest rates are very low at that time, or perhaps the market is slumped or something, in other words, I really can't tell you what your benefit is going to be, versus the defined benefit plan here, which basically said, you work for me till age 65, you're going to get this much money. So here, we've identified the benefit. Here, we've actually identified the actual contribution. So you need to know the difference between those two aspects, and so you should go back to your notes and go back to the LQP Advantage book and get more detail on that. Regardless of which one of these plans you actually buy, okay, the point is that there is a point at time where the money is vested to you. In other words, you now own this money. In Ontario and probably other provinces as well, okay, it's no more than 2 years. In other words, from 2 years onwards, all the money that's being contributed into the plan, whether it be your employer, or you and the employer has put in money, in other words, in a contributory plan, it vests to you. In other words, it is your money. Certainly the employer has the option to vest it earlier, but it cannot vest any later than that. So basically, from the 2-year point onwards, it does become your money. So it is a vested contract at that point. In other words, at that point, it becomes locked-in money. In other words, you can't turn around and just simply collapse this plan. The plan is now locked in. The money is there. It is your money. So you're not going to lose that money. The point is, you can't simply turn around and say, okay, I'm going to quit and I'm going to basically collapse the plan, take the money, pay my taxes, and then spend it. It is locked in, so therefore you can't take your money out. You can leave the money with your current employer. So if you leave your employer, you can certainly leave the money sitting in there. You could, in fact, also take the money but it has to go to your new employer. In other words, you can roll over to your new employer. You can also buy what's called a LIRA. Again, I urge you to go to your Advantage LQP book and look up the meaning of a LIRA. That's basically a locked-in retirement account. It's basically a holding account for your money, essentially. So certainly the money can go into a LIRA up to age 55. You must leave it, in fact, in a LIRA. You could leave it right up to age 71 if that's what you want, but certainly up to age 55, you can't take that money out in any way, shape, or form. It has to basically stay in a locked-in retirement account. Once you get age 55 and over, then you can actually start taking money out, and we have what's called LIFs, locked-in fund, basically. And again, I urge you to go back to your book, because there's a number of options where how you can actually get your money out. But the important thing is to remember is that this money is locked in. So therefore, it has to stay locked in forever and a day, actually until the very day you die, actually, because this is a lifetime, remember that L, okay, this is a lifetime income. That's what the L stands for, okay, is that you will get a lifetime income. So therefore, you can't collapse this kind of plan. It is designed basically to give you a pension for the rest of your life, okay? The other thing that this kind of plan does is that it usually has a beneficiary designation. In other words, you can leave the money to your spouse. So therefore, if you pass away, invariably what will happen is it may be the same amount of money, it may be a reduced amount of money, but your spouse will also get a pension as well. Again, it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime plan. So there is a survivor benefit attached to these kind of benefits. Okay. Usually, also these plans here are indexed to inflation. So it basically tries to keep up with the purchasing power of your money. So inflation, as you know, erodes that purchasing power. So these basically tend to also be indexed. One thing to be very, very careful of is that any contributions that are made on your behalf or you make on your own behalf into either one of these kind of plans also will reduce, and this is important, will reduce the amount of money that you can put into your own individual RRSP. In another lesson, we'll be talking about what we call pension adjustment, PA as they call it, okay? So pension adjustment. So in RPP, there is a pension adjustment. That pension adjustment will, in fact, reduce the amount of money that you could put into an RRSP. So again, what we're trying to do here is to integrate these particular plans. So once again, go back to your book because it very specifically talks about these particular areas, and it's beyond the scope of this particular lesson, but please go to your Advantage LQP book for further information.